Tim, joining us now is political commentator and writer Ian Haworth. Ian, so you just heard the DOJ is trying to force sex change procedures for children and be allowed in the state of Tennessee, but the state wants to protect children until they're adults. What's your reaction to this federal lawsuit?
I mean, the world is just completely on its head. When we're talking about, again, vulnerable children, the vast majority of whom actually change their mind and decide that they don't want to go ahead with these surgeries, they are at risk of this really woke, radical agenda. And the fact that the idea that we should be mutilating children as the only solution to keep them from killing themselves is both immoral and also false. There is no evidence to suggest that especially early use of these surgeries impacts things like anxiety or suicidation. But it's just a lie that is really destroying the lives of children. That's the core of this. And I cannot believe that the Democratic Party, who love to go on and on about how they're the compassionate, caring, empathetic ones, just cannot mutilate a child fast enough. It's shocking to watch, honestly.
Sad but true. Yep. Well, Ian, Kansas lawmakers won the battle with the Democrat governor for same-sex bathrooms. Why has it become too much for our culture to allow women to use restrooms in peace and safety?
Yeah. Well, also not even restrooms. In the segment mentioning prisons, rape centers. These are places where the most vulnerable women can go. Prisons, women are incredibly vulnerable. And the idea that in California, for example, men who identify as women are being placed with women in prisons. Again, this is about the most vulnerable in our society just being completely abandoned by the side that claims to care about them. I think the reason that the transgender issue has become the issue of our time is really because progressives, or so-called progressives, have to keep progressing. But our society is actually pretty great. And so they have to try and just pick the most really niche, ridiculously unimportant issue, quite frankly, to push. And right now, that's forcing the ability of men to go into a bathroom or a locker room with women. I mean, that really says a lot about where our society is right now.
Very good analysis. And about 3 weeks ago, you tried to speak in Albany at the State University on free speech and on the First Amendment. How were you received?
I would say not all that well. The majority of people who came were excited to hear me speak. Whether or not they agreed with me, that wasn't the point. I was there to speak about free speech. But a small minority of students loosely associated with the democratic socialist movement on campus decided that the speech wasn't going to happen. So they came in chanting things like FTPUSA, calling me a KKK member, which is also ironic given that I'm a Jewish immigrant and the KKK aren't exactly falling over themselves to have me join. And they were just spitting in students' faces. One person teared up a Bible. Really, again, compassionate, empathetic stuff from the left. And they just did not want the speech, ironically, on free speech to happen. But the real point I want to make here is this is happening all over the place. I'm not an isolated incident. This is happening almost every single week to conservative speakers, and people really need to wake up to the fact that free speech on campus just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, Mattel announced a Down syndrome Barbie. Some people asked if this was another woke moment, but you had a very insightful observation on this. Tell us your response.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a pro-life win. If you talk about Down syndrome people, they're not represented in our culture particularly at all. And then you also have the pro-abortion movement who views them as people who should be aborted in the womb. And so the fact that Barbie are releasing a toy that humanizes Down syndrome people, I think is a huge win for the pro-life movement. And so when you have people like Steven Crowder, who claims to be pro-life, laughing at it, laughing at a Down syndrome person holding a doll and talking about retard strength, I think it's disgusting, but also completely counterproductive if we actually care about winning in the pro-life battle, which is what I care about more than laughing about a so-called woke culture war. I think what Mattel did was great, and I think more companies should be going in this direction.
Valid point. Yeah, Title 42 is set to end, of course, as we know, May 11th. Border Patrol agents are preparing for a massive surge of illegal immigrants across the southern border of the United States. Do you think the Biden administration is handling border security properly at all?
I don't think they're handling it at all. I think it's just an open door right now, which is really what they want. I think they want to be changing the culture of the United States by essentially letting in whoever wants to come in for really the wrong reasons. The idea that legal immigration is a choice. Why would anyone do that if they could just walk in? I think Biden has been a complete failure on the border, but he's been a complete failure in every part of American life. So it really doesn't surprise me.
And speaking of Joe Biden, he's running for re-election, as we know. So do you think the administration has enough cheat sheet cards for the next year and a half, or should the DNC put him back in the basement and let Kamala Harris hit the campaign trail instead?
Oh, I think Joe Biden will be repeating 2020 and running his campaign from the basement, enjoying, nice warm tea and maybe some pudding, and just pointing to us as the January 6th Nazis that they all think we are. I think that's going to be his campaign. It worked last time, so I think it's up to us to make sure it doesn't work this time.
All right. Well, Ian, where can our viewers find your work?
They can follow me on all social media, IG, HAWORTH. You can find links to all of my written work and videos there.
All right, Ian, thank you for your time.